Rob Reiner made a decision that night, and someone found out before he was ready. Inside that Brentwood house, a plan meant to save a family turned into something far more dangerous. By sunrise, one man was hospitalized, another had vanished, and the truth was already slipping away. The night Brentwood, filled with flashing lights, did not begin with chaos. It began with silence. Days earlier, inside a quiet room lined with books and old scripts, Rob Reiner made a decision that, in his mind, was overdue. For months, those close to the family say tension had been building between Rob and his son, Nick Reiner. It wasn't loud. It wasn't public. There were no dramatic outbursts on red carpets or viral confrontations. Instead, it was something slower. Exhaustion. Repetition. The kind of strain that settles into a family and refuses to leave. Friends describe Rob as worn down. Years of stepping in. Years of smoothing things over. Years of protecting Nick from consequences that seemed to circle back again and again. Each time, Rob believed it would be the last. Each time, it wasn't. Then came the message. Short, direct, final. According to someone familiar with the situation, Rob told Nick he was stepping back completely. No more intervention. No more rescue. No more emotional negotiations. It wasn't angry. That's what unsettled people later. It was calm. And calm, in this case, felt permanent. To Rob, it was a boundary. To Nick, it felt like abandonment. That distinction matters. Because in Hollywood, silence can be louder than confrontation. When Rob stopped responding when calls went unanswered and texts received no reply, Nick didn't interpret it as space. He interpreted it as something closing. One friend would later say Nick kept staring at his phone as if waiting for a verdict. Every missed call felt deliberate. Every hour without response felt like confirmation. And hey, race where the story begins to shift. Around this time, rumors began circulating quietly within their circle that Rob wasn't just distancing himself emotionally. He was preparing something. Meetings were canceled. A scheduled appearance was quietly dropped. He reportedly traveled briefly out of Los Angeles. Some say San Diego. Others want confirm. What is confirmed is this. Rob began consulting professionals. Lawyers, counselors, specialists. On the surface, it looked responsible, a father trying to manage a complicated situation with discretion. But perspective changes everything. Because while Rob believed he was organizing help, Nick began sensing strategy. And strategy feels different than concern. One person close to Nick later described him as on edge, but not chaotic. That distinction is important. He wasn't spiraling publicly. He wasn't broadcasting anger. Instead, he grew quiet, observant, suspicious. He reportedly told someone, he's planning something. That line didn't make headlines at the time. It does now. Meanwhile, online speculation was beginning to grow, not from official statements, but from absence. Rob's withdrawal was noticeable. Nick's tension was visible to those paying attention. And when a family known for privacy becomes even more private, people assume there's a reason. Then Romy Reiner entered the picture publicly. When Romy first appeared on camera days later, her voice shook not with performance, but with strain. She suggested something subtle but powerful, that Rob's decision wasn't driven by anger. It was driven by fear. Fear of what? She didn't elaborate. And that omission became the loudest detail of all. Because if Rob wasn't stepping back out of frustration, then what was he preparing for? That's the question that now reframes everything. If Above Story was about distance, so we are discussing about discovery. Because everything changed the moment Nick Reiner realized his father's silence wasn't passive. It was active. Sources close to the situation say Nick didn't stumble into the truth by accident. He found it. Emails, bookings, quiet confirmations. A paper trail that suggested Rob Reiner hadn't just stepped away emotionally, he had been building something structured, deliberate, long-term, plane reservations, intake forms, communication with a private recovery facility far outside Los Angeles. Not a short stay, not a public rehabilitation program. Something isolated, controlled, quiet. To Rob, this was a solution. To Nick, it looked like removal. And perspective, once again, became the fracture line. One insider described the moment Nick understood what was happening as terrifyingly clarifying. It wasn't rage at first. It was disbelief. According to someone he spoke to shortly after, Nick kept repeating the same sentence. He's not helping me. He's getting rid of me. That belief hardened quickly. Now race why this matters beyond one family conflict. When a public figure like Rob Reiner, a man known for decades of influence, composure, and authority, takes decisive private action, it carries weight. It suggests planning, intention, finality. And when the person on the receiving end feels excluded from that decision, the emotional impact multiplies. Nick didn't see paperwork for recovery. He saw an exit strategy. And this is where the tension escalates. Friends began noticing a shift in him. Not explosive, not dramatic. Controlled. Too controlled. He stopped venting, stopped reacting. Instead, he grew observant, measured. He reportedly started checking locations, asking subtle questions about his father's schedule, watching for movement. One person later said, he wasn't melting down. He was calculating. Meanwhile, Rob's behavior also changed. He went quieter than usual. Fewer calls returned. Fewer public appearances. It looked like retreat. But some believe it was preparation, tying off loose ends before implementing what he saw as a necessary intervention. Then came the phrase that would later echo through interviews and headlines. He kept saying Rob was coming for him. At first, those around Nick assumed it was metaphorical, a son feeling cornered by a powerful father. But the repetition of that phrase unsettled people. Because it didn't sound like paranoia. It sounded like dread. And dread implies inevitability. Around this time, online speculation intensified. Anonymous posts hinted at legal consultations. Rumors surfaced that Rob had been seen meeting a high-profile attorney known for handling discreet, high-stakes matters. Nothing confirmed. Everything whispered. But silence is oxygen for speculation. Then something small but explosive happened. A social media account linked loosely to Nick posted a black screen with 4 words, "He warned you." It was deleted within minutes. No explanation. No context. But it changed the temperature overnight. Because warnings imply knowledge. Knowledge implies secrets. And secrets imply that what happened next wasn't random. By the end of that week, both men were moving differently. Rob with quiet resolve. Nick with unsettling calm. Romy caught in the middle, aware something irreversible was forming but unable to stop it. And then came the night when preparation collided with perception.
He walks around the block every day. He writes every day. Mel Brooks comes over to the house. They sit there. They have dinner. They watch a movie. Any movie with Secure the Perimeter in it.
Something about that night felt rehearsed, but not in the way anyone expected. Brentwood was quiet, as it always is. Wide streets, trimmed hedges, gated homes that give the illusion of control. Inside the Reiner house, lights were on later than usual. Rob Reiner was in his study, according to investigators, reviewing documents one final time. The intake confirmation, the travel details, the arrangements that, in his mind, represented structure after years of instability. To him, this wasn't punishment. It was containment. But upstairs, Nick already knew. He had seen enough emails left open, paperwork partially hidden but not fully erased. A timeline that pointed to a departure date sooner than he expected. And in that moment, the narrative inside his head solidified into something dangerous. This wasn't help. It was exile. Around 10:47 p.m., a neighbor later reported hearing raised voices. Not screaming. Not violent at first. Intense. Controlled. 2 men speaking over each other, neither backing down. The argument, according to someone briefed on the investigation, centered on one question. Did you think I wouldn't find out? That line matters because it reframes everything. Nick wasn't reacting to a suggestion. He was confronting a plan already in motion. Rob reportedly tried to explain. Words like stability, future, protection. But intention and interpretation had already split apart. What Rob believed was mercy, Nick heard as rejection disguised as strategy. Then something shifted. There was a crash. Furniture overturned. Papers scattered. An open suitcase torn apart. Investigators would later describe the scene as chaotic, not calculated. This wasn't premeditated violence. It was escalation. And then, suddenly, silence. That silence lasted long enough for neighbors to question it, but not long enough to intervene. By morning, the street was flooded with flashing lights. Police vehicles lined the block. Paramedics moved quickly inside the home. Rob Reiner was found injured but alive, unconscious when they arrived. The details of his injuries were not publicly disclosed, but officials confirmed there were signs of physical altercation. Nick was gone, not hiding in the house, not waiting nearby, gone. When Rob regained consciousness hours later in the hospital, investigators leaned in expecting confusion, maybe shock. Instead, according to a source familiar with the questioning, he whispered 3 words. He knew everything. Those words didn't clarify the situation. They complicated it. Because if Nick knew everything, then the confrontation wasn't spontaneous. It was inevitable. Outside the hospital, Romy Reiner stood before cameras but offered almost nothing. Her face was pale, her voice controlled but fragile. "He tried to fix it," she said softly. "It just went wrong." "Fix what?" That question echoed louder than any official statement. Then another detail emerged: deleted voice messages recovered from Rob's phone. All from Nick. Raw. Emotional. In one message, Nick's voice trembled with a mix of anger and fear. "You're not saving me. You're burying me." That sentence reframed the narrative yet again. It wasn't just about control. It was about perception. A father believing he was preserving a future. A son believing he was losing one. And here's the unsettling part. There was no clear villain in that room. Only 2 men standing on opposite sides of the same decision. By the end of the day, Brentwood returned to its usual calm. But inside that house, something had permanently fractured. Nick had vanished without a trace. And Rob, once the composed figure of authority, now looked like a man who realized too late that strategy without trust can detonate. But the story doesn't end with that night. Because disappearance creates a vacuum, and vacuums pull truth to the surface.
I would say initially, I don't know if it is so much now, but initially, oddly enough, was Sid Caesar. You know, even though my father was on Sid Caesar, it was more Sid Caesar. I was kind of drawn to his style of performing. I mean, it was very raw and real, and I just thought he was the greatest sketch comedian that ever lived.
Nick Reiner didn't disappear in panic. That's what unsettled investigators most. Phone data later confirmed he left the Brentwood house late that night and drove only a few miles away. Security footage from a nearby hotel showed him walking through the lobby alone. No had pulled over his face. No urgency. He checked in calmly. Same clothes. Same measured expression. Not fleeing. Positioning. That detail reshaped the timeline. Because it meant the confrontation inside the house wasn't the end of something impulsive. It was part of something unfolding. By morning, as news of the incident spread, Nick had already checked out. The room was left almost untouched. No signs of distress. No erratic behavior. Just absence. And absence, in a case like this, becomes louder than noise. Rumors began immediately. Some claimed he was heading toward the coast. Others suggested he had been seen in small cafes across Los Angeles in the days that followed, sitting alone, not ordering anything, just watching. None of it officially confirmed, but enough to create a pattern. He wasn't gone. He was near. Meanwhile, Rob Reiner returned home under quiet medical supervision. Those who saw him described a man altered, moving slower, scanning the street before stepping outside. The confidence he once carried publicly now replaced with something more cautious, more aware. One neighbor reported seeing a car parked down the street late at night, headlights off. Another claimed someone had been standing near the gate one evening, motionless, before disappearing into the dark. Police dismissed it as rumor. No proof, no charges, no official threat. But fear doesn't require confirmation. Romy remained the emotional center of the storm. She stayed in Brentwood despite friends urging her to leave. She reportedly kept calling Nick's phone, straight to voicemail, every time. Eventually, she began writing letters instead. One, according to someone close to her, ended with a line that now feels haunting: "You don't have to fight us. You just have to come home." But what did home mean anymore? As weeks passed, the narrative evolved. This was no longer framed publicly as a violent confrontation. It became a story about fracture. About a father who believed decisive action was love. A son who believed autonomy was survival. And a daughter trapped between interpretation and consequence. Then one final detail surfaced quietly. Investigators confirmed that days before the confrontation, Nick had searched for legal information about involuntary commitments and long-term recovery placements. He wasn't unaware. He was researching, which means he understood what might happen before it did. That realization shifts the weight of the story again. Because if both men believed they were protecting themselves from each other, then the explosion inside that house wasn't sudden. It was inevitable. And somewhere between strategy and fear, the Reiner family crossed a line they may never fully step back from.
I should probably shut up and listen to him because he knows a lot more about this. I don't know anything, so I'll learn whatever he has to teach me.
This story was never just about one night in Brentwood. It was about silence compounding over time, about decisions made privately that carried public consequences, about how intention can fracture when communication collapses. Rob Reiner believed he was ending chaos. Nick believed he was being erased. And in that space between belief and reality, something irreversible formed. There are still unanswered questions. Where is Nick now, truly? What did Rob mean when he said he knew everything? And what exactly was feared so deeply that it justified such a final plan? In Hollywood, narratives are often polished before they reach the public. But this one remains raw, unresolved, human. And perhaps that's the most unsettling part. Because sometimes the real tragedy isn't what explodes. It's what builds quietly, unnoticed, until silence can no longer contain it.
My feeling has always been that whether it's alcohol or drugs or gambling or sex, whatever the thing it is that you are doing to excess is usually based on self-medication, because there's some issues that you have that you're trying to ease the pain of.
If you enjoy in-depth coverage of the stories shaping celebrity culture and entertainment, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay connected for the next big story.